Hi, everybody. This is Frank's EC channel. Glad y'all are tuning into this series. We're going to be working off of a teaching by evangelist N.B. Parrish regarding shepherds. It's spring, as everybody knows. The Jewish community's preparing for Passover. Christianity's preparing for Easter. It's all coming down here March, April sometime. So a lot of people this time of year are getting in the religious mindset, thinking about church, synagogue, or something like that because they're looking at their spiritual needs. Well, N.B. Parrish produced a nice little pamphlet called Warning to the False Shepherds. The thing is, Jeremiah, the prophet in his day, warned his false shepherds. Yahushua the Messiah, known by many as simply Jesus, warned the false teachers and false shepherds of his day. Later on, we have the Apostle Paul, or Rabbi Shaul as I like to call him, warning the people that false teachers and false prophets would come, even out of the new emerging Nazarene Israelite / Christian movement that was arising from the teaching of Messiah Yahushua. Therefore, we're going to kind of look through the study and see what we can glean from it, because you don't want to be the lamb led to the slaughter by a false shepherd. So stay tuned. What if a doctor told you had cancer? Wouldn't you want to know? What if you thought you had cancer? Wouldn't you like to get a checkup? Or would you just say, I'm okay? A lot of people don't like uncomfortable news and try to ignore it maybe. But sometimes people don't think about their spiritual well-being. They assume they're doing okay. They're trusting their spiritual physician, their shepherd or pastor. Maybe he's well-meaning, or maybe he's not. Maybe he's teaching truth or trying to. Maybe he's not. But you're responsible for your soul before the Most High. If you tell a lie big enough and long enough, people will start to believe it. That's a quote from Joseph Goebbels. Really worked for the Nazis. A lot of people perished. There was a lot of death and sorrow and suffering because of that lie. So I don't want you to experience sorrow, suffering, or worse, spiritual death. Pastors have cheapened the grace of Yehovah, or the Lord, as a lot of people know him, and teach, unfortunately, that you can ignore his word, ignore his commandments, and it's okay, because they either don't understand grace or they've perverted grace, which is worse. It's not grace or law. You have to have both. They work in concert together. Isaiah 56, we're going to kind of look at that passage. And it says, Thus said Yehovah, keep judgment, do justice, do righteousness. Keep the Sabbath from profaning it. How many people keep the Sabbath? You say, well, Frank, I'm keeping the Sabbath. I go to church on Sunday. My church teaches that Sunday's the Sabbath, that it was replaced by Yahushua, Jesus, the apostles, or the resurrection. We celebrate that, so therefore we don't need to keep the seventh day of the week. Many years after his death and resurrection, people start keeping Sunday for different reasons. And some start teaching that it replaced the Sabbath. You really get to the Council of Nicaea and Constantine, and then you get several, this whole edict, this whole dogma of replacing the seventh-day Sabbath with Sunday, because there were all kinds of pronouncements from that council about the evil Jews. And you can look it up. You can study the history yourself. I'm not going to give you every quote. There's plenty of information on it. So we're not going to do anything the Jews do. However, for centuries, still people persisted in following the seventh-day Sabbath that were believers in Messiah Yahushua. The Jews kicked them out of the synagogue if they were Jewish, but the churches, by and large, kicked them out of the churches because they wouldn't accept the universal church system's new rules. And this is where the false shepherds come in. Doesn't people have fear of the Most High? Evidently not, because they think that man can change the Most High's rules. And he says, I don't change. In fact, he goes on to say that the Sabbath is a sign for his people. Exodus 31:13 and 20 and other verses and other chapters. Yet people will say, well, Frank, that's for the Jews, we're the church. See, that's another thing that came down the pike, was dual covenant theology or dispensationalism that teaches that the Most High has one covenant for the church and another for Israel, which are the Jews. The guy that came up with this and the ones that accepted it and promoted it out there, it's been the most popular teaching amongst Pentecostals and Baptists for, 80 years. However, truth, because there are other Christian groups that teach still, they hold to the original universal church position that this thing called the church replaced national Israel or the Jews. Or does the Most High bring you into his covenant, graft you in, according to Romans 11 and Ephesians chapter 2, that you're no longer just an old Gentile barely getting in, but you're now part of the commonwealth of Israel. And that's where we're going to look at some more information from N.B. Parrish on the false shepherds. So, I have a question for you. Brother Parrish poses this in his study about the shepherds. Isaiah 66:23 is just one place in Scripture where it says the Sabbath will be kept in the millennium. Many Christians don't believe in a millennium. They're called all-millennialists. Yet the Scripture says it's there. Other Christians say, yeah, well, right now we're in the church age or grace, and then we'll go back to law. Well, if he did away with law, nailed it to the cross, whatever they teach, why would you go back to it? What's the purpose? I would like to propose that his covenant is consistent and it's everlasting, and nothing changes in his Torah covenant until the new heavens and the new earth. Since it's his Torah, then he has a right to amend it or change it. But he doesn't do away with it. Because the Master himself, Yahushua, said, till heaven and earth, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law till all is fulfilled. I can assure you, if you studied the Torah and you had any understanding at all, it's not all fulfilled. There's prophecies not only in the prophets, in the writings, in the Psalms, but in the law or Torah itself that are yet to be fulfilled. As N.B. Parrish points out in his study on the shepherds, referencing Matthew chapter 5, 17 to 19, those verses, did Yeshua, Jesus, if that's what you prefer to call him, lie? Because he said not one jot or tittle. In fact, in 5:19, there's a gentleman that will be called least in the kingdom. Thankfully, he's in the kingdom, but he's called pastor least because he taught against the law and the prophets. However, the same sermon in chapter 7, verses 21 to 23, gives a terrifying warning to those who claim to be his followers that he says, I never knew you. Depart from me. A lot of people have interpretations of that, but they ignore the verse that says, you who practice lawlessness. When you study that in Scripture, it has to do with the law of Moses. If you as a Christian believe that Yeshua, Jesus, created the entire universe, you also have to believe that he's the one that wrote on the tablets at Mount Sinai. He doesn't have two sets of commandments different. Yeah, Moses had two tablets. That's the marriage contract with Israel. Acts chapter 7 in the King James Version says that the church in the wilderness in chapter 7. Everybody thinks the church either starts in Acts 2 or 9, depending on their flawed interpretation. Stephen says it started in the wilderness, the congregation, the assembly. So if you teach against his word, you're lawless. Well, Frank, the law doesn't save. That's not the point. Yeah, we can look at Isaiah chapter 24, from which Paul draws in Romans chapters 3 to 8 about sin. Then no one has kept the law. No one. That's a deeper study. The question is then, what's it there for? If it's not going to save you. You've always, from Abraham to this day, been saved by grace through faith. The law is to help sanctify you and bring heaven to earth, to bring the rule of the Most High down to a place where the wicked one tries to destroy and disrupt all the Most High did. Will you fall into the trap to believe the lie, or will you walk out the faith with fear and trembling? Like Paul said, work out your salvation. Didn't say work for, but work out. One of the things you can do is follow his Sabbath. That will help sanctify you. Most people don't know that, don't believe that. They think their church doctrine, their catechism, or something else is what gets them in. Of Ephesians 2. Let's look at that. You are his workmanship. Ephesians 2, verse 10. Created in Messiah Yahushua unto good works, which Elohim, or your translations say God, hath ordained that you walk in these things. What are the good works? Well, it goes on to point out that, we're part, in verse 12, of the commonwealth of Israel. One time I was at a job at a hospital, and there was a nurse reading her Bible out on the patio eating her lunch. And she happened to be in Ephesians. And I said, well, what are you studying? And she says, oh, my church is studying Ephesians. And I said, well, what chapter are you in? Oh, I'm in chapter 2 already. I pointed these verses out, verses 10 or 9 actually to 16. And she had never seen it like that. She had been taught she was part of something called the Gentile church. And I said, look, you're brought into the commonwealth of Israel. It flat says it. You might have once been a Gentile. Because if you go back to Ephesians chapter 2, starting at the first verse, it talks about we were dead in trespasses and sins. Well, if you're no longer dead, because you've put your trust in Messiah, that's a past existence. Now, if you're going to walk in him, he's brought you in by faith, or grafted you in. I'll talk right here in a little bit, like Romans 11 says, gives you some more deal, to the commonwealth of Israel. Well, if you've got promises in the commonwealth of Israel, you got blessings in the commonwealth of Israel, you need to know what they are. The Sabbath and the Feast of the Most High are really a blessing for you. The Most High's calendar is different than the church calendar. Yah starts his calendar in the spring. His first month starts with Pesach or Passover, and it goes to first fruits, which most people in Christianity have no clue about. Extremely important, because Yahushua Messiah is called the first fruits from the dead. There's a whole deep stuff there. And goes on to unleavened bread, then it goes to Pentecost or Shavuot. Strange to me that when I was in Pentecostal churches, none of them celebrated Pentecost, yet even on the Catholic calendar, they have a celebration for Pentecost. Rather weird. So people have been given a false teaching. Maybe your pastor's ignorant. Maybe he's the chapter 5 of Matthew 5 guy who teaches ignorantly against the Torah. and he'll obtain mercy. But if he's one of the false shepherds in Matthew 7 that knows better and teaches against the Torah, it says, I never knew you. So the bottom line is, N.B. Parrish concluded, if you don't understand and believe you're Israel, you might not be saved. That's a horrible prospect. Now, for those of you who have never heard anything like this at all, maybe you don't even go to church. Maybe you got tired of Christianity because you're at least smart enough to see some of the hypocrites and false teachers out there. Well, that's no excuse. You're responsible for your own soul, and this might be the thing to get you pointed in the right direction. If you accept Yahushua as Messiah, if you believe that the Most High Yah raised him from the dead physically for you, and that he will return for you, then his feasts are still valid. Scripture says, till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law. That's either true or not. Did Jesus lie? Or did the false shepherds lie? It's your soul. Like we started the study quoting N.B. Parrish, if someone said you had cancer, wouldn't you try to get it cured before it was too late? What kind of cancer of the soul is there for those people who have been led down the road of deception by dangerous false teaching?